So we just had another major Street Fighter premiere, and that normally means two things. First is you get some awesome highlights, and second is you get tons of people trashing the PS5. So it first started with this very level-headed tweet from Ending Walker, which just showed, some of the inconsistencies that come when you go from PC to PS5. But then, arguably my favorite tweet of the year when it comes to fighting games is Punk's tweet that says, "The Game Boy Advance would likely have a better outcome than a PS5. Now, is Punk being sincere here? Who knows? Because you know what? This is an age-old debate going back to Street Fighter 2, 3, 4, 5. It didn't matter which Street Fighter game you're playing. People always wanted to find the best port or best hardware to play the games on because it did make a difference. And that's actually the main reason I made this video. I just want to highlight some of the things that are different between PC and PS5 and why people might be frustrated, but then hopefully give some solutions that, might help tournament organizers in the future. So the first question I gotta answer, and I get this question asked to me tons in person, and I've also had people mention it in the comment section. Do settings or do different consoles and hardware make a difference? And in this case, is PS5 different than the PC? And the answer is, it's way different. So I just want to start by saying, I play 90% of all my Street Fighter 6 on a PlayStation 5. I don't have a gaming PC, where I run Street Fighter 6. But I have to tell you, when I do go over to my friends' places that have PC versions, I definitely notice a difference. There's way less lag on the PC versions of Street Fighter 6, and you notice it especially when you're doing anti-airs or perfect parries or whiff punishes. You're able to react way better just because there's less lag overall. And I think that's where I empathize with players the most, because especially players that take this game very seriously, they want to play it at a high competitive level. There's so much money on the line and there's so much exposure for that game that you just want to play at the best rate possible, and you want to play in the best way possible as well. And let's be real, these pro players, these tournament level players, they want to make a name for themselves. They want to have a legacy as well. And when you're playing what feels like a game that's underwater compared to what you're usually playing at, I can completely get the frustration. So I never try to call them salty or just say they're upset with how things have gone. I totally get it. We're all competitive, so we know how things are, right? But the biggest issue is it's way more complicated, unfortunately, than just pinning it on a console. And I'm going to explain why. The first is it's a multitude of things. It's not only the PS5 being less powerful than a PC, it's oftentimes that the setup that people are using as well, so like the monitor situation, really doesn't, complement or is that compatible with the PS5 either. So not only are you battling the console, you're also battling the other tech and hardware as well. So that's another obstacle you gotta go over. Then you have the big issue that how big is this tournament? You might have thousands of people that have entered, and the venue might be huge, and it's hard to provide PCs for every single, session that's there. And it's just easier to have a console readily available. Then you run into the issue, depending on the tournament, of how long it goes. And one of the biggest issues when it comes to consoles, especially lately when people tweeting with the PS5, is that there are huge overheating issues that are happening. And not only is that causing the system to slow down, that the game to lag, but it also fries the different types of devices that you're hooking up to it. And then the fact that the console overheats actually debunks one of the biggest arguments that people have against pro players on this. They always say, if they know the standard's going to be on a PlayStation 5, they should practice on a PlayStation 5 so they'd be ready for it. But let me tell you, I know people that exclusively play on PS5, and when they travel to EVO Japan, so some of my best friends that went to EVO Japan, when they played on the PS5, they reported back that it was extremely laggy, or it felt like they were playing underwater. And they're people that have been playing on the PS5. And the reason for that likely was that the setup wasn't as compatible, but the console was also overheating. So that argument that you got to practice on a PS5 might not apply to every single situation, especially if the tournament's going on for a long time. And then the final reason, there's so much money involved. There's some tournaments like EVO that's exclusive to Sony, and obviously Sony's pumping out tons of money to make sure that the PlayStation is front and center in all these tournaments. So it's hard to overcome that obstacle as well, because let's be real, how many of us have Sony money? I mean, we might get it one day, right? I'm a positive guy. If you're listening to this, you're definitely gonna make some Sony money one day. Don't worry, I got your back. So here are some solutions that I think could possibly help, and notice that I say could because let's be real, there's not a one-stop fix for every single thing here, and you're always gonna run into some types of issues. But I think they're worth exploring, and hopefully it just adds a little bit more consistency. And then that way you keep tournament goers happy, because let's be real, so much of the things we love about fighting games are attending tournaments and just having fun. You want to make sure you're playing the best thing possible too, right? The first thing I would say is, if you know it's going to be a PlayStation 5 exclusive tournament, hopefully the tournament organizers do some research to find the best monitors to use for PS5s, because some will be better compatible than others, and hopefully they also go through all of the settings to make sure it's as optimal as possible. I think right away to make sure you do that would be good, and I do think that some pro players are mentioning that they would go through the settings after and not everything was tuned that the way it was supposed to be. And I get it's hard to do that for a large tournament with, you know, hundreds of PS5s there, but trying to minimize those as much as you can will make a difference for sure. And then to tackle the overheating issues, which I personally believe is the biggest issue, especially when the console overheats and it fries like your cables and stuff, that's just going to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth. I think that you should swap out consoles or turn them off when you're not using them to fight the overheating issue. And I'm glad a player that's much better than me, like Big Bird, also brought this up, because I think the overheating issues is what's causing a lot of this extra lag and that extra underwater feeling. So if they do have more consoles readily available, or they're not using the console at that time, just try to turn them off or swap them so you fight the overheating issue. And then finally, it's a bit more expensive, but it might be worth looking and doing some tests on the PS5 Pro to see how that runs differently. I'm sure it's still not as good as PC, but it definitely has to be better than the PS5. But knowing our luck, it'll somehow be optimized worse, because that's just how things work for fighting game players sometimes. But I do think that some of the tournament organizers should look at that option as well, especially if it's a smaller tournament. They don't have to put as much cash into, you know, getting 25 or 35 PS5 Pros, and then we can test it out and move from there. But at least with this new type of hardware, hopefully it runs the software better. But overall, that's the video. I hope you like it. I like to make these short videos once in a while, especially these Sunday nights where I don't have much to do. But I'll tell you one thing, we all want to see the best product available, and if it means, you know, watching players on PCs, hopefully we do move to more PCs in the future. But if we can find ways to make the PS5 or PS5 Pro a bit more optimal, then maybe we'll get some good out of it as well. I'll catch you all on the next one. Peace out, everybody.